First off, U.S. President Donald Trump has outlined his vision for the world in his address at the UN General Assembly in a wide-ranging speech that touched on everything from migration to wars and green energy. Trump harshly criticized the United Nations and Europe on his return to the world body, his first appearance there since 2020. He told the Assembly that it's time to end the failed experiment of open borders and accuses the UN of facilitating an invasion of Western countries. He singled out Europe, saying the continent is in serious trouble over migration. He described climate change as the greatest con job ever and reiterated that recognizing a Palestinian state will be a reward for the terrible atrocities Hamas has committed.
We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th, even while they refuse to release the hostages or accept a ceasefire. There's never been anything like that. I'm very honored to have done it. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. And Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing to them, and it was very embarrassing to them when I found out about it, I can tell you that. But they have to immediately cease all energy purchases from Russia. Otherwise, we're all wasting a lot of time. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
At the United Nations Summit on Palestinians during the United Nations General Assembly Anger in New York, several leaders spoke in support of the two-state solution and the recognition of the state of Palestine. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres declared to the gathering that statehood for the Palestinians is a right, not a reward, and denying statehood will be a gift to extremists everywhere. He said, without 2 states, there will be no peace in the Middle East, and radicalism will spread around the world. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, an outspoken critic of Israel's war in Gaza, called for the state of Palestine to be admitted to the UN after a French-led summit on recognition. Spain, alongside Ireland and Norway, already recognized a Palestinian state in May.
Let's be clear, statehood for the Palestinians is a right, not a reward. And denying statehood would be a gift to extremists everywhere. Without 2 states, there will be no peace in the Middle East, and radicalism will spread around the world.
Excelencias, esta conferencia marca un hito trascendental.
This conference marks a historic milestone, but it is not the end of the road. It is, and it must be, only the beginning. That is why I want to make 2 proposals. The first is that the state of Palestine must become a full member of the United Nations. The procedure for Palestine's membership in this organization, on equal footing with other states, must be completed as quickly as possible.
En pie de igualdad con el resto de estados.
ستقوم مصر بمجرد التوصل لوقف إطلاق النار Thus, Egypt will, as soon as we reach a ceasefire, host an international reconstruction conference in the Gaza Strip to mobilize the necessary funding for the Arab Islamic Reconstruction Plan in coordination with the government of Palestine. This will ensure that the Palestinian people will remain on their land and it will help them overcome the huge losses caused by the aggression. I call upon all our partners and the international community to contribute to this reconstruction effort and early recovery as part and parcel of any serious move to make the two-state solution a reality.
لتحويل حل الدولتين إلى واقع ملموس.
All right, and for more on this, here is international affairs analyst Dr. Marek Laskiewicz from London. Dr. Marek, glad to have you join us on the world. Well, what do you make of the recent, let's even talk of the speech of Trump. What do you make of the speech generally, where he was talking about escalator, and then talking about what the UN gave him, escalator and prompter?
These were actually signals to show that the UN is a useless body. It can't even run an escalator. And it shows and confirms the previous comments he was making that the UN offered no help in ending the 7 wars, which he asserts he actually finished, whereas other people say he did not, in fact, end them. However, the point is it reinforces the message as a failed body and as a useless body. That's why he mentioned these things.
The point is, should that be a point of discussion? I mean, these are electric things. It could fail at any time.
Well, that actually is sort of a yes and no. It's quite true electric things can fail. But to be quite honest, escalators usually work all the time. The point about it showing out a useless body, is because in theory they should so do the escalators to have them serviced. Obviously, they don't fail. So he has a point. Another aspect is why it failed. He did not actually give this implication, but other people might read into it that they deliberately failed. Who knows? The point is that in terms of his speech, it was simply a reinforcer for his previous points that the UN was no good at anything.
Well, his speech, still asking you what you read about his speech, doesn't it look like Trump wants the world to see things from his own vision instead of a world order?
Yes, Donald Trump has a world view, and he asserts it, and he has no interest in other world views. What the problem with Donald Trump is, of course, he keeps changing his mind. Recently, he has talked about restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity, which is precisely 180 degrees opposite to what he was saying before. Here, when he makes these comments about the UN, I'm afraid by this time people listen with one ear on the basis that it's not clear whether he really means it or might not change his mind. However, what is quite clear is at any given moment he has a worldview, and it certainly does not really take into account other people's points of views, which he regards as plain wrong, and does not listen to any arguments from the other side.
Well, I mean, that in itself looks like a real problem. Well, Canada, Australia, the UK, Portugal, France, and you had Sanchez of Spain there speaking very strongly, have all accepted or recognized the Palestinian state. What's your reading into this? And then Trump denies Palestinian officials visa to get to the UNGA.
Well, first and foremost, many people accept that the two-state solution, and these countries have shown it, is a way to ensure peace in the Middle East. And in fact, the Spanish Prime Minister, when he stated these things, actually quite clearly pointed out that this was a route which involved UN membership. And it was also pointed out, of course, that it's a way of combating the extremism, because the extremists feed off the fact that the Palestinians have no voice. However, President Donald Trump has a completely different view, and his view is that any concession, the slightest concession of any sort to Palestine, is rewarding Hamas, even though, of course, the two-state solution was rejected by Prime Minister Netanyahu before the October atrocity. that was, of course, referred to by President Donald Trump. And in point of fact, two-state solution was ruled out by Prime Minister Netanyahu and his allies well before that atrocity. So, in fact, it's got nothing to do with it. And the reason why he denied the visa was to accentuate, to emphasize that Palestine is not a state and has no right of entry. That is why he denied the visa.
Guterres, the Secretary General, says categorically and strongly, statehood for Palestine is a right, not a reward, and then denying it will encourage extremism across the world. Because you remember when we were discussing, you said something like, who even says who is a terrorist? Who defines? I mean, South Africa in question and some other states.
Yes, well, let's go through the points. First and foremost, terrorism, the Israelis, that is to say the Jewish Israelis, indulged in terrorism in order to set up the Israeli state, in order to chase the Palestinians off their land on the assertion it was their land because of their religion. And the point about this is at that time, the Israelis were defined to be the terrorists. Now the Israelis are in charge. They define the other lot, which is in this case, of course, the Palestinians to be the terrorists. So the question of who is a terrorist is indeed always open to question. And of course, it's by no means unusual that, for example, when the AK was fighting the Germans regarded the AK, the Polish Home Army, as terrorists. And to this day, the Poles regard them as heroes, as freedom fighters. And that is just one example in South Africa. And so therefore, this business of terrorism is actually, if you like, a secondary issue. Were Palestine to be recognized state tomorrow, then they would no longer be called terrorists, and that is that. However, what is important here is, does Palestine have a right? This is by no means, in fact, true. There are many nations around the world who are actively suppressing or deny other nations, and it therefore follows that a nation which has no statehood has no automatic right to exist. That is a decision that is made by other nations or by the occupying power or by whomever it is. Again, Poland is a classic in question in point, and this is in fact where the whole business of oppressed nations becoming states arose, because during the 19th century, Poland was the one nation that no one could agree upon, that should it be a state or not. And certainly there was no question of it having a right. And so therefore this is misleading. What he might mean, and I suspect this would be a stronger argument, is that Palestine has a moral right. Well, okay, but you could make the case out for other nations as well. And so this is the weaker side of his argument. What is correct is that, yes, denying the Palestinian statehood will encourage extremism. One reason why Hamas is supported is because they want statehood. And one reason, for example, why Hezbollah was supported is because they defended the then Lebanese. And so therefore, yes, this is a problem, and the two states is a solution, but one which Israel and America have rejected entirely.
And yes, of course, Netanyahu says until he gets to see Trump next week, then he will decide what action to take. But I mean, 65,000 killed and counting. The question the world is asking is, when will this destruction and killings be enough for both Netanyahu, his government, and Trump, his number one supporter, saying no, that this has gone too far. We'll leave it there. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, thank you for your insights always on the world.